Look who it is! It's me, Lockstin, and I'm back with another water type video because man oh man do I just love looking at all of the water types again. Fish! We recently went over why each water type Pokemon has its water typing, and it's an awesome video, but because there are so many water type Pokemon, we had to skip over some details to save time. But as such, we missed a pretty important detail. We totally forgot to mention what type of water each water type Pokemon would be primarily. By which I mean salt water or fresh water. Because when it comes to real-world water breathers, this is an incredibly important distinction to make. It's a matter of life and death. But what is the difference? And how does it apply to Pokemon? Let's find out. You know what rocks? Well, the answer is today's sponsor, because look at this guy! Yeah, rock on, dude! Bombastic Brothers is a mobile platform shooter that I think works out really well. The story is fun, the characters are charismatic, and the art style, it's so tasty! I mean, just look at these characters. We've got this Jack. He's so fun! Look at him! With his boots! Fake legs like Star Fox! Easy to full-on assault, also his gun turns into a flamethrower! Tony Jr. is a kid in a robot suit. What's not to love? Super cool robot. And each character has their own abilities. It's pretty fun. And you can support my channel by downloading Bombastic Brothers via my link down below within 2 weeks from the time this video was released. That way, you get a bonus hero, Jade Yang. She's awesome, though Grim has got to be my favorite. And no, that's not just because he's an edgy skull guy. I happen to like his sniping abilities. So a big thanks to Bombastic Brothers. So what really is the big deal when it comes to saltwater or freshwater? And I mean, who cares? Because you shouldn't even be able to get oxygen from the water. That's so much more work, so inefficient. Why are fish so stupid? So getting right into it, fish actually don't breathe. I mean, in the traditional sense. In fact, what they do instead has a bunch of its own fancy terminology, and it basically means how a fish regulates its body fluids. I mean, after all, if you breathe fluids, everything inside of you at that point is pretty much fluids. So, this fishy process is called osmoregulation, and really, almost all living organisms do this process. For humans and most land creatures, it's basically the process of intaking liquids and then losing it through various means, most likely peeing, and all the stuff in between. That's why, like, if you're working out and sweating a bunch, you don't have to pee as much. It's because you're sweating it all out. You're sweating out your pee. It's not the most scientifically accurate way of putting it, but it's the way I like saying it. And this process is a lot more difficult to explain in fish than you'd think, but it's the main difference between freshwater and saltwater animals. So we kind of have to. But first, let's describe the difference between the two waters. Saltwater is just pretty much normal water, whereas freshwater is the special one. In fact, freshwater is only about 10% of the total water on the planet. So freshwater is definitely the special one. The salt content, or salinity, of saltwater is about 3.5%, whereas freshwater only has a salinity of 0.1%, meaning for every liter of ocean water there is 35 grams of salt diluted into it, whereas fresh lake or river water only has 1 gram of salt. So yes, freshwater does technically have salt, but a lot less. Let's talk freshwater first, as it's a lot easier for the baseline explanation, as salt just adds complications. Freshwater fish are able to live in fresh water and are also normally hardier than their salty counterparts, as their habitats are smaller, so they can get a lot hotter and a lot colder easier. The ocean is a great temperature regulator, whereas lakes get steamy or frozen over all the time. And fish gotta live through that. Also, freshwater fish have more land-based predators than salty ocean fish, for obvious reasons. And along with being hardier, they also have a much higher salt content inside of their bodies than the surrounding water, which is very important information. Now, let's quickly go over osmosis, as it's half of the name in osmoregulation, after all. Osmosis is a common word in science, and it comes from Greek, meaning to move or transport. In microbiology, it describes the actions of cells as they transfer, mostly liquids, through a semi-permeable membrane, which occurs because there is a pressure difference on both sides of the wall. For example, if we have 10 molecules on one side and 2 on the other, the molecules are going to want to be equal, so 4 of them will pass through the wall via osmosis, so there's 6 on both sides now. And this is where our fish comes into play. You see, if a fish has a high amount of salt in it and lives in a low salt environment, see where I'm going? The fish then needs to stop its body from losing all of its salt. Because living things need salt. It's super important for a wide variety of bodily functions, in all life forms pretty much. Many more terrible things happen if you're low on salt than if you're high on salt. We know now that, at least in humans, not having enough salt is significantly more detrimental than having too much salt. And in fish, it is definitely a matter of life and death. This is where our freshwater fish become different from saltwater fish, because freshwater fish are normally saltier inside than the water they're swimming in. Thus, all that water wants to flow in, flushing the salt out. Balance is key. But the problem is, if that were to happen, the fish would die. This kills the fish. However, fret not, young ones, for the fish has many ways to combat this. To start, freshwater fish tends to not drink much water. And yes, fish do drink water. Fun facts. And they don't need to drink much water because their body already absorbs so much of it. But even so, they still produce copious amounts of urine. And you thought swimming in a public pool was bad. Ha! Try a lake, or a fish tank for that matter. The goldfish in your aquarium may be producing 1/3 of its body weight in urine every single day. Now you know why you need to filter your fish. A filter for your fish. Don't filter your fish. This kills the fish. Now, there is another problem with producing so much urine, and the same applies to humans, so listen up. Peeing too much means necessary minerals and nutrients, as well as waste products, are lost. It's called hyponatremia. Long story short, you drink too much water, and it washes out all of your necessary minerals and electrolytes through pee and sweat. 8 glasses a day, they say. Nah, just stay hydrated, but not overly hydrated. You shouldn't have to force yourself to drink because it's healthy. That seems difficult when you're a fish, though. But by ingesting food and absorbing necessary salts in places such as the gills, fish actively take in enough of these minerals and electrolytes to replace what's lost in its urine. So, their gills are specially made to absorb ions in the water too. Now on the flip side, like flipping a fish in a pan, saltwater fish are the opposite in almost every way. They exhale ions through their gills and drink loads of water constantly. They also lose water through their skin instead of absorbing it. And they pee extremely concentrated urine. Pretty much only waste products are expelled from their body. In fact, the only reason they produce so much urea is because their kidneys are huge compared to the rest of their body. Plus, they have a large intake of ammonia from their salty alkaline water. Ammonia is a very deadly substance in large quantities, but through filtration in the fish kidneys, they are able to turn it into urea quick enough to skip this harmful stage. Urea, by the way, is much less dangerous of a chemical in the body, and is part of what makes urine urine, if you couldn't gather that from the name. And the only reason saltwater fish produce so much urea is because they have to. I mean, most vertebrates can easily release the regular amount of ammonia from their body, but saltwater fish intake ammonia at such an insane level that they would literally die just by storing a relatively regular amount of it. So they need to convert it to super concentrated urea first and get it out ASAP. And this fact, along with their gills acting slightly differently with the water, allows them to live in high saline environments. Their lives are saved thanks to pee. But now here comes the fun part. What would happen if you put the saltwater fish in freshwater and the freshwater fish in saltwater? I mean, first of all, they'd die before, anything super terrible happens, just because that's how fish do. But for some specifics, the saltwater fish would just balloon up, as it's not really great at expelling water, whereas the freshwater fish would shrivel up into a tiny little raisin fish. Now, there are special cases of fish, of course, and I feel we're going to be seeing a lot of these in the Pokemon world. Meet the Euryhaline, an organism able to live in both salt and freshwater, and they're commonly found in tide pools, small bodies of water that change salinity with the tides. Think crabs, small clams, and barnacles, maybe an octopus or two, possibly sea stars, those kind of things, or salmon. Though, they are a special case because they live in both bodies of water but don't really change daily like the tides. Rather, they migrate from freshwater to salt and then to fresh again. Different periods of life, rather than constantly changing. Man, I feel like this is like the third or fourth time we've talked about salmon on this channel. I feel like my 4th grade teacher is haunting me with all of that salmon knowledge that she taught me. Guess that's what happens when you grow up near a major salmon hatchery. Another thing I learned in elementary school is that there are no saltwater amphibians. And ha! Ha, I say to you, those were but lies. But lies, for there is one. It's the crab-eating frog. However, it's only able to live in up to 2.9 salinity water, so it's on the lower end of salt water. Perfect for hunting in tide pools then, where crabs live, hence the name. And the only reason it's able to live in this type of water is thanks to its stinking massive kidneys that are able to produce enough urea, much like saltwater fish. See, now that would make an interesting Pokemon. A frog in the ocean, kind of like the frogs from Wind Waker. It'd be cool. Well anyways, there are many water-type Pokemon that would actually fit well into this category, along with amphibian, or even just straight up land creature that happens to be water type. However, this video is more of a fresh versus saltwater debate, so if I miss any Pokemon that you think breathe water, not air, let me know. But I'm going to exclude any water-type Pokemon that I deem land lubbers, like Squirtle and then. They aren't actually able to breathe water, they don't have gills, as well as they are based off of reptiles, which breathe solely air. Plus, if I remember right, I feel like I've seen Squirtle holding its breath while underwater in the anime, don't quote me on that. But that would make sense. There are plenty of water-dwelling creatures that still breathe air, like whales, dolphins, sea turtles, and more, you know? And also, just to clarify, because some of you are that glasses kid from Polar Express, obviously this isn't canon. Water Pokemon can go wherever. The games and the anime do not concern themselves with salt versus fresh water at all, because that would only just complicate things. In this video, we are talking, if we added a bit of realism to Pokemon, what would they be? A fun discussion with some learning involved, so don't go down in the comments and be that guy. Okay, so first up, let's get the saltwater fish over with. Starting with Gen 1 and going down the list, because I'm just gonna go down the list of them. With a handy dandy Pokedex. I need to get a Pokedex prop, like Birdkeeper Toby, that'd be cool. Saltwater fish are generally found in the ocean, or possibly very brackish, salty, landlocked bodies of water. First up is Horsey, Seadra, and Kingdra, and also Skrelp is with them. They're all based off of seahorses, and if you didn't gather from the name, that implies the sea. However, there are some freshwater seahorses that you can see in pet stores, though these are normally actually pipefish, a cousin of the marine equine fish. Now, some seahorses can be seen in brackish freshwater estuaries, that is to say, salty freshwater places, kind of like those crabs we talked about, but they still are just normal, salt-living fish, but in the wrong places. Staryu and Starmie, along with Toxapex and Marini, are 100% saltwater fish. In fact, they would actually die, not because of the lack of salt, but because they need the calcium content from the salt for their bodies to function at all, since they are sea stars, and that's how sea stars work. They have a mighty high need for lots of calcium. Tentacool and Tentacruel are both squid jellyfish things that live in the ocean. Much like the real-world squid and jellyfish, they are both marine environment inhabitants, which, I should specify, does not mean water. Marine means of the sea, or of the ocean. So, saltwater. Marine equals saltwater. Anyway, fun fact, cephalopods are all marine animals, so this includes octillery as well. Ammonite and Amistar are based off of ammonites, who are marine-dwelling mollusks that lived near the bottom of the ocean during the Devonation through Cretaceous period. Similarly, Kabuto and Kabutops are also marine-dwelling creatures based off of troglobites, and also horseshoe crabs. They're like a cool in-between of the two. In fact, Wimpod and Golisopod are also based on them, and they are also two salt drinkers. Chinchou, Lantern, Huntail, Gorbis, and Relicanth are all based off of deep sea fish that live in much, much lower salt content waters than most other ocean fish, as, fun fact, the ocean floor is less salty than the upper ocean. Mantine and Mantike are actually based off of kite rays or flying rays, a type of saltwater ray. It's always interesting to think that manta rays breathe just by moving forward. If they ever stop moving, they stop breathing. In fact, now let's real quick just finish off all of the oceanic fish that are boring. Sharpedo's a shark, Quillfish is a pufferfish, though note there are 29 freshwater pufferfish, but it's outweighed heavily by the vast majority of them being saltwater. Relicanth, Bruxish, Luminion, Finion, Lovedisk, Amolamola, Wishiwashi are all based off of ocean-faring fish that live in a multitude of environments that share the fact that they are all filled to the brim with saltwater. Frillish and Jellicent are a little more interesting in the terms of their environment. All jellyfish are saltwater. However, there is a fish that looks exactly like a jellyfish that lives in freshwater. Though it's technically slightly different from a jellyfish, but we still call it a jellyfish because it looks like one. It's like how the thorny oyster is actually a clam, not an oyster. You know, Corsola is a coral that really needs that calcium the saltwater provides. So again, much like Staryu and Starmie and the gang, they are also saltwater, and are even more dependent upon that than most. Shellos and Gastrodon are based off of the sea hare. I mean, it kinda looks like a rabbit, if it was a gross slug. But they too are only found in, you guessed it, the ocean. Clauncher and Clowitzer are both based on shrimp, though in a really weirdly mutated lobster sort of way. Both shrimp and lobster live in the ocean. Binnacle and Babaracle are both based on barnacles, who in real life are solely marine dwellers too. And finally, for the saltwater dwellers, we have Pukumuku, the sea cucumber. So after the saltwater Pokemon, I'd say it's only logical to start on freshwater animals. These include animals found in rivers, lakes, ponds, who knows? Pretty much bodies of water that aren't the ocean or the seas. Goldeen and Seaking are both based off of koi, meaning that they are freshwater fish, as this fish is commonly used in landlocked ponds, used for decoration, because that's what humans do. They take living creatures and make them decoration. Did you know that koi is technically just a kind of carp that we kind of bred to look different? They're like the dogs of the fish world. Speaking of carp, right next to Goldeen would be Magikarp, another freshwater fish. However, in-game you really are able to find Magikarp next to everywhere there is water, salt or fresh. But notably, its evolution Gyarados was first seen in the wild in the Lake of Rage, technically a freshwater source, which kinda sorta specifies freshwater, at least as a primary dwelling place. However, Gyarados is a special magical dragon serpent thing that probably could breathe both salt or fresh whenever it wanted, because it's magic. And because it's a Pokemon. Carvana is a piranha whose habitat is most notably the Amazon River. Other river fish include Basculin, who is based on a mix of a largemouth bass and a trout, both of which are lake and river fish. Barboach and Wishcash are also carps, but a lot less magical than Magikarp, so they get their own category of just carp. Wooper and Quagsire are categorized as the water fish Pokemon, but they're actually both based off of amphibians, not fish. Game Freak. I know, disgusting, right? How could Game Freak lie to us like this? Corfish and Crawdont are based off of, crawling fathers. Who comes up with these names? Anyways, crawdads are found in ponds and slow-moving rivers, and they are sometimes called freshwater lobsters too, but they aren't lobsters, because they are freshwater. And with that, we're actually done with all of the little fishes in big ponds. Next up are Pokemon that work out perfectly as a little bit of both, and in between. Really, I thought this category would be bigger, being that it's Pokemon and all, and pretty much all Pokemon can do it in canon, because Game Freak doesn't care. But okay, whatever. These are Pokemon that work out perfectly as Euryhaline organisms. I swear I must be butchering that. Shelder and Cloyster are interesting. While many bivalve animals live in saltwater, there are a few small species that are able to live in freshwater along with brackish water. Again, the kind of water that can change. While I would have put them in the saltwater category, I feel like they are more so based off of the Euryhaline animal. I must be butchering that, as we see them basically everywhere in Pokemon, too. In fact, Krabby and Kingler are also in this category for the same reasons. Their evolution is so related, in fact, that we did an entire video about it. You should check it out here. It goes into their evolutionary tactics that led them to be the Pokemon that they are today. An odd one here is Remoraid, being based off of the archerfish, who is a freshwater species. However, there are 2 or 3 families that are Euryhaline, though it's also based on the Remora, which is a salt-dwelling fish. So it's fitting that Remoraid is in this category then. It's a combo of 2 different fish from 2 different worlds, just like Hannah Montana. And that's it. Any other Pokemon that I didn't cover are either a water-dwelling reptile or mammal, or some weird concoction of the two that breathes air. or they aren't water type. I'm looking at you, Stunfisk, who would be salt water, for sure. And then there's Electros and its line, who would also be salt water, unless it's based off of those scary New Zealand eels that are in lakes, or maybe river leeches. Those weren't water type, so I forgot about them. Any others I forgot to mention? Let me know down below, and I hope you enjoyed going over all of these boring mons again. So until next time, please remember to never stop using your noggin. Blub. Blub. The sound fish make. Blub. And as a reminder, check out Bombastic Brothers with the link in the description and the pinned comment.